everybody? In here with my guy Jordan there we go. It says to my right, over here. But I had to call Audible real quick. I was going to stream on my channel. Something was going wrong with the stream, but Jordan came through clutch, so we're on the Gold Mine channel right now. But whatever. Concept, let's get it out. Jordan, what's up, my guy?
So, just chilling. Another day.
Another day. So, in the Twitter world, in 49ers Twitter world, there have been rumblings of my favorite football player in the entire world possibly being available for trade. And of course, when a player becomes available for trade, it's only a matter of time before the 49ers get involved, at least through rumors or however else it happens. So Julio Jones apparently is now available through trade, right? Again, have to reiterate, favorite player in the league, best receiver in the world still to this day, and maybe we can have an argument about that. But I'm going to leave it to Jordan because, Jordan's very smart when it comes to things like this. Remember, Julio Jones, as much as I love him, selfishly, I want him on my team because I want my favorite player on the team. But 32 years old, injuries are piling up, right? I believe he's 32, right? 30 or 31, something like that. He's up there in age. And questionable Julio, that's pretty much been his name the last few years. If he's just straight up not playing or if he's just questionable. So those injuries are there. And the sarcastic 49er fan would say fits right in, right? But Jordan, what do you think? First, I'll ask you this. Let's just say the 49ers were so inclined to make an offer towards the Atlanta Falcons. What would that take? What would that be?
I don't think they have enough to do it, honestly, which is why I'm not even entertained. I think it would have to be like a first-round pick. And he's old, and he's going to cost a lot of money. So there is a path where maybe it would be only like a second or a younger player, maybe. Like if there's a defensive player they really like, maybe they could justify that. But it still is Julio Jones, and he still has the name recognition and the name value. And it's not just the name, it's the production that comes with it. He has had some injury things, but, he injured his hamstring last year, and he still put up a pretty respectable season after injury because I think it was like week 2. And he's still, he wasn't great, but he was still a very solid wide receiver. So, the age thing is kind of a concern, but it's also, the Niners gave up, it was a 3rd and a 4th, I believe, for Emmanuel Sanders. And Sanders was already older, and no offense to Emmanuel Sanders, isn't anywhere near the same caliber of player that Julio Jones is. Very few players are. That's no disrespect to Emmanuel Sanders. So, at the very least, it would cost an early second. And I think any team looking at the 49ers is going to you don't want to make assumptions, but if you're making a trade, you're probably going to assume that second round pick next year isn't going to be in the top 10, top 15 like it was this past season. So I just don't know realistically what they could give up outside of maybe a defensive player. If Atlanta really likes a player on the defense and they see like a Dre Greenlaw or someone like that they're really they really like and they really want, and they're like, hey, this guy can come in, start for us, and we could take him and maybe a late day 2 pick or something. I don't know, dude. I just can't see it. Like, this is the cost of moving up to get Trey Lance. As much as we're all psyched about it, that really hinders your ability to do other things moving forward. And there's not really a package that I'm looking at that the 49ers, if they're going to get into a bidding war with other teams, what do they really have to offer that Atlanta's not in a position where they're going to be doing the 49ers any favors. So I just don't see what they could realistically give up to get him, as much as I would like to have him on the team.
Right. And I think that, the question is that I would have with you is do you feel like that Atlanta is looking to move off of him less because of the injuries and all those things? It's more salary cap driven. Okay. So maybe that drives the price down, but you're absolutely right. What would that take? And if I'm Atlanta, I'm not moving off of a generational talent, even diminished as he is at this time, for a 3rd, 4th round pick. Like that's not really getting you anything back. So do you believe that, his contract has a lot to do with what they're trying to move him for? And would that help the 49ers in any way? And do you see that maybe opening up a package or a passage for them to get through?
Yeah, I think that the contract actually isn't as bad for them. If it's after June 1st, I know the hit is a lot less. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I do know that it's a move that they probably wouldn't make until after June 1st. And I think as much as it is a salary cap thing, and it's also kind of like, you hate to say this because Julio Jones is so good, but like, do they really even need him at this point? Like, I hate to say, they have Kyle Pitts. Calvin Ridley would be a number one wide receiver on 90% of the teams in the NFL. He's 26 years old, so he's right entering the heart of his prime. And again, I'm the same way as you are. I get nostalgic with players like Julio and Cam and some of these guys that, while they're still productive NFL players, they're not the guy they were 5 years ago. Julio's not the same Julio that was putting up 1,700-yard seasons, but he still is this bona fide, do-it-all receiver. He is fast. He has good hands. He is good in the vertical game. He's going to win 50-50 balls. We do know Kyle Shanahan has an affinity for him, trusts him, and it'd be really hard to see a scenario where either Trey Lance or Jimmy, whoever's starting, wouldn't immediately build a connection with him and have trust in him, which we did see over the last couple of years. That has been kind of an issue for the 49ers quarterbacks, trusting the wide receivers that they have had on the team. So, it makes sense, but the cost is what really doesn't make sense. And I know people get into this, mode where it's like, well, you don't know what draft picks are going to be, and Julio Jones is an all-pro level player, so of course you trade the draft picks for him. The 49ers are also in a position where they gave up, again, all those picks for Trey Lance. And the way that you stay consistently good in the NFL is you keep replenishing your team with young rookie contracts. And if you don't have those picks to make, you're going to have a very hard time keeping that core together. And I just struggled to see a scenario where there is a huge need for it. Again, I would love Julio Jones on the team. I'm with you, dude. I think he's been the best wide receiver in football since Terrell Owens was in his prime. And I think he was better than Calvin Johnson. No offense, Calvin Johnson was a freak, but Julio just did he did everything. I would love him on the team, but I just don't think it's a need. I don't know how you feel about that. It's not like this wide receiver 3 spot. I talked about it on your Twitter the other day. I don't think it's as big of a need as people are making it out to be. And again, getting Julio, it would be awesome, but it would be an extreme luxury move at this point. And that's just not the way the 49ers have operated, in my opinion.
Right. And honestly, for me, I agree with very much a lot of what you said. What's going to be the cost? Atlanta's not going to sell him for peanuts just to get out of the contract. I don't see that happening at all. And that would kind of conflict with what they want to do right now. I mean, I feel like them getting Kyle Pitts, them getting a new coach probably puts them in a bit of a more win now mode, even if that doesn't sound, because they don't have a great defense. They still have Matt Ryan. They still have guys that are going to put, points on the board. And again, this league is full of parity where teams who were at the bottom last year move up, things like that. So I agree with you 100%. Me wanting Julio Jones on this team is just for me, for the first time in my life, having my favorite player on my favorite football team and being able to get a Julio Jones jersey. But I agree with you. The cost doesn't line up. The 49ers are not full of assets right now to do these things. And it is a bit of a luxury pick. But you already kind of pushed us into the next actual, topic, which is the wide receiver 3 discussion. So I pointed out that, right now, when we talk about wide receiver 3, and this is a void that Kendrick Bourne has left open, there is a bevy of, I guess bevy is the wrong word because that makes it sound like it's a great amount of competition, but there's just a log jam of competition of guys who could take over that wide receiver 3 role that Kendrick Bourne had, which, by the way, he third down, touchdowns, those were his things in the red zone, whenever you needed a big play. So Kendrick Bourne, while I didn't feel the need to bring him all the way back, it's kind of left the void at least a little bit on third down. So, I went through the list. Jalen Hurd, Travis Benjamin, River Craycraft, Austin Watkins, Richie James. I'm missing somebody. I know I'm missing somebody. But talk to me about how important this wide receiver 3 is actually to the 49ers in terms of how often do they use them and where the targets go and things like that.
So that's the point where I've gotten to where it's like, it's nice to have as many weapons as possible. The more weapons you have, the better your offense is going to be. I'm not, reinventing the wheel by saying that. But the Niners specifically don't really need that third wide receiver as much as a lot of teams do. So if you go back and you look at the 49ers personnel groupings, they used 3 wide receiver sets less than all but 2 teams in the entire NFL last year. So a lot of the NFL is pivoting towards more spread out formations and a lot more, 3 wide receiver sets, or they'll put tight ends in the slot. They're moving to spread the ball. It's a lot of it is kind of, the NFL is very cyclical. They're running into a lot of college concepts and whatnot. But the 49ers are in a position where they run a lot more base personnel than they do any of these 3 wide receiver sets, 4 wide receiver sets, putting Kittle in the slot, any of those things like that. So it's not only like not a huge deal, because if you look at the number, I was talking to somebody on Twitter, right? Like, oh, they do it 44% of the time. Well, yeah, 44% of the time is a relative number, you know. Like Kansas City does it 73% of the time. The Rams do it 65% of the time. That's what they want to do. There's a fundamental difference between what these teams want to do and what the Niners want to do. And while, yes, if you're going to have 3 wide receiver sets almost half the time, like think, hey, you want to have a good third wide receiver. We also have to understand, for Kyle Shanahan, the play caller, he's not going into games drawing up plays for, no offense, River Craft and, you know, Jalen Hurd going out this year. Like these guys, they might get a couple design things for them a game, or they might be a second or third guy in a progression. But they're going into these games designing looks for George Kittle, for Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. And those guys are going to eat up such a large share of targets that third wide receiver spot really doesn't matter to me. And, like, I think there's guys on the roster right now that are more than capable of filling that void. So, like, if we look at it like this, I know there's more to it than just, you know, numbers and patterns. But if you look at last season, Kendrick Bourne had, I think it was like 75 targets, 74, something like that. And that's like, you know, it's not a small number by any means, but it's also something that if you think about it, between 2 or 3 players, 20, 25 targets, are you telling me right now that Kevin White and River Craft or Juwan Jennings or one of these guys can't eat up 25 targets in an NFL season? Because I've seen nothing to suggest that they can't personally. And I think that, you know, while I'm not counting on them to be a stud wide receiver, I have seen nothing from Kevin White or River Craft specifically that make me think they wouldn't be capable of eating up a third or fourth option in this offense. Like eating up the targets, I should say, for that. Like, if you look at River Craft, I know people made a joke about it, and he had that game against Green Bay where he had that drop, but if you watch his route running, he does a lot of the same things that Trent Taylor did in 2017, where he's good in the short area, he has nice quickness, he's not going to, you know, blow by guys physically, but he's crafty and he's good in short area, has that good burst. And then Kevin White, I already know how you feel about Kevin White. Kevin White is honestly probably one of the more slept-on players, and it's been injuries. It's never been talent because of him, and he's had a full year in the system to get healthy. If he is 80% of the player that he looked like coming out of college at this point, 75% of that player, how could he not sit there and be a contributing third wide receiver? And we have to also remember that third wide receiver is the 4th option when you include George Kittle as well. So I think it's overblown, dude. I don't want to keep rambling about it, but I think there are guys on the team right now that are good enough. And then again, the alternative is who's out there that's a better option. Maybe there's somebody that you really like. There's nobody that I'm looking at that would be worth throwing money at that's going to immediately come in and be a massive upgrade over who they already have, in my opinion.
Right, and then, you know, my concern really draws more to what if Deebo misses games, what if Ayuk misses games, what if Kittle misses games, right? And I think that's where a lot of Kendrick Bourne's production came from, right? Because he wasn't in 3 wide receiver sets. He had to play more in those 2 wide receiver sets because of injuries and things like that. I wanted to touch on Kevin White because we've spoken to several players who have played against this man. I had one player on this team tell me that the best receiver on this team, including Brandon Ayuk, is Kevin White. Was the most physically gifted receiver they've ever gone up against. This is someone who's been in the league close to a dime in this league, honestly. Said these words. So, I mean, I don't know if that means anything, but I know he goes up against him in practice and he notices things like that. Really, my concern boils down to if Deebo misses games, if Kittle misses games, if, God forbid, Brandon Ayuk or any of the 3 misses games, now you have a deep, deep problem Now these guys, I can't depend on them to be outside. I can't depend on them to be reliable. That's really more, I think, where my concern comes from. Thank you for the point about how often they're in wide receiver 3 sets, because they're not. And you also have to remember, the 49ers have shown you in this entire draft that they're ready to get back to running the ball 40, 45 times a game again. So again, those targets are going to go down no matter who's the quarterback, whether it's Trey or Jimmy. They are going to run the hell out of the ball this year, and that's what they intend to do. So that diminishes those targets and such. I'm just afraid that the depth past these guys is what gets me nervous. So some names that are out there, right? You touched on it. Golden Tate, Dede Westbrook. In a perfect world, Jamison Crowder, if the Jets let go of him, things like that. But again, there's no wide receiver 3 sets for those guys. All those guys are slot receivers. All those guys are going to have to be in the slot. George Kittle usually goes in the slot on passing downs and things like that, and when they draw those up for him. So it's a good point. I think more what I'm talking about when I talk about wide receiver 3 is I talk about the depth behind those guys. And if, God forbid, Deebo misses a game, God forbid Kittle misses games because of how he plays, God forbid something happens to Brandon Ayuk, then you find yourself with a lot of question marks. Richie James balled out in the Packers game. That game was largely a blowout. He was like pretty much the only guy that was actually catching the ball or was open. So I just worry more about that. If there's, God forbid, any injuries to anybody here on this wide receiver depth chart, then things get very hairy on the outside for those guys. So I think that's really more where it's at right now. I mean, that's really, I agree with you on all of your points, honestly. Especially when you come down to numbers and you talk about how often they're in 3 wide receiver sets, it's not often at all. But I would like to see one more reliable name. Like if, God forbid, those two guys go down on the outside, Debo and Ayuk, then I want to be able to plug somebody in where you say, like, again, I didn't want to sign Kendrick Bourne, but Kendrick Bourne was solid, very solid. And I think that's what they're kind of missing right now. Right now, they're banking on a lot of what ifs. What if Jalen Hurd is ready? What if Jawan Jennings actually shows up? What if Kevin White balls out? What if River Craig? So it's a lot of what ifs. Again, I'm big on what do I know and less what I can predict. So I think it's more about that and where my concern comes in with wide receiver 3.
Yeah, and like the biggest thing for me too is, again, understanding fundamentally what Kyle Shanahan wants to do. Kyle Shanahan wants to get in a position where these guys are running the football, because running the football opens up the play action. It really messes with what a defense can do. And when the 49ers are running the ball successfully, what it does is it makes defenses have to go out and base defense, generally having an extra linebacker on the field. When you have a guy like George Kittle that's going up against linebackers, it's going to be a lot easier than when there's extra defensive backs out there. You start getting these looks over the middle off a lot of the play action that they run. So, like, when they're in 3 wide receiver sets, this is all from 2020, so the data's a little off with, the fact that there was a revolving door at quarterback. They were trailing a lot of the time, so a lot of times I feel like teams knew they were passing. So, I think that inflated the number that they were actually in 3 wide receiver sets as a result. But when they're in 3 wide receiver sets, their successful play rate was 44%. And when they were in 2 wide receiver sets, their successful play rate was over 50%. It was around 54%. So what that essentially means is that because they're in that base personnel, they're running a lot more. That success rate, I can promise you, is almost guaranteed to be better because they're running a lot more play action. And that's what Kyle ultimately wants to do. I know that it's kind of a unique circumstance, but like that Green Bay game in the championship a couple years ago, like if Kyle Shanahan could win every game, like I don't think he would throw a single pass if he didn't have to. I genuinely think, as much as we know that he wants to air it out at a certain point because he has to, if Kyle could run the ball every single down, he would. He's not one of these coaches that wants to go out and run 3 wide receiver sets and spread the field like Andy Reid does, or how Sean McVay runs a similar system. But almost all of Sean McVay's stuff does come in 11 personnel, where Kyle's in 21 personnel a lot of the time, and the 11 being 3 wide receivers and a running back, and the 21 being the 2 wide receiver, 1 running back, 1 tight end set. So that's ultimately where the 49ers want to be, in my opinion. They want to be in a position where it's George Kittle lined up in line at tight end, Debo and Ayuk out wide, and then they have Trey Sermon, Raheem Mostert, Elijah Mitchell, Jeff Wilson, whoever may be at running back there. That's going to be where they're going to find the most success, in my opinion. And then also in that 22 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, 2 running backs. That's when you see Juszczyk out there, and you're going to see blocking tight end like Dwelly, maybe Charlie Warner gets in there, because that's really when Kyle starts to it's almost like a boxer. He's throwing body shots at the defense, and then that's when he takes the top off. He hits them with the uppercut, and you have these deep play action plays or these leap plays that they run where Kittle's busting double moves on Kevin King, and he's wide open 20 yards away from the nearest defender. So it's a matter of philosophy for me. And again, I'm not sitting here trying to tell anybody what Kyle Shanahan thinks. I'm just going based off of there's years and years of data of him wanting to do things his way, and he hasn't really budged from that. So maybe with Trey Lance, they do want to pivot to something more, spread out, closer to kind of what McVay's doing. I don't think it's going to be quite what Andy Reid's doing because Mahomes is just a freak. But I just don't – like that's another thing where it's like I think if they were to find a guy like a veteran – I know you've talked about Golden Tate. I've seen Golden Tate in the comments. If Golden Tate were to come in on a veteran's minimum, I'm sure they would have no problem checking it out. But to be completely honest with you, Golden Tate hasn't really looked that he hasn't looked that much better than the guys they have now, in my opinion. And I think that there's something to be said for having somebody in the building that you're already comfortable with, that already has a rapport with teammates and all that stuff. Like, there is more to football than just talent. And Golden Tate, if it was Golden Tate 5 years ago, I'd be 100% with you, but I just don't know that it's enough that it moves the needle, that you're like rushing to dump a Kevin White or a Kraft or one of these guys who's been here that's familiar with the playbook and the system now, when their role really isn't that important. And I totally agree with you, Jason, that, if somebody gets injured, that like changes. But I don't think that you can go around allocating resources based on guys getting injured, because ultimately what ends up happening is if you're going allocating based just on that, then they wouldn't have been in the position they were in last year with the backup. Like Kyle's made it very clear. You could argue that's a good thing to do, but Kyle made it very clear that we're not going to sit here and spend a bunch of money on the backup quarterback because we feel like if our starter's out, it's like that what's that Tom Moore quote, like the guy who's the offensive coordinator for the Colts, and they were like, "What do we do with Peyton Manning?" He's like, "We don't practice that." Like, there's nothing. I'm not going to say it. It was a little bit more explicit than that. He's basically, we don't practice. So I don't think Kyle's in a position where he's that concerned about wide receiver 3, and he knows that if more than one of Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle are out, like if 2 of those 3 guys are out, it doesn't matter who they bring in off the street at this point. Basically, is my point. Like, I don't think that there's somebody else they could bring in that's going to really make you feel that much better.
Right. So let me float another name out there for you. And he's not a wide receiver, but he's a pass catcher, and he's somebody who doesn't block a lot. Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz didn't show up. He's not there at minicamp. It's pretty much the worst-kept secret that the Eagles don't want to have him there anymore. They already have somebody who's ready to replace him in Dallas Goedert. His contract is a little big, but that can be worked around. Zach Ertz would be strictly what Jordan Reed was last year. Just straight up, situational, put him out there, here and there. What do you think about something like that? Would that be something that's a little bit better? Because, I'm not certain. Do you have the numbers in front of you as how much they ran to tight ends? But they did have specific packages for Jordan Reed and for someone that, they didn't have Kittle and Reed. That's what we all thought we were going to get all offseason, and we never got it. But what would you think about possibility of Kittle and Ertz with one receiver, something like that, in those packages?
Ran 2 tight ends. They had 2 tight ends on the field at the same time, about 13% of the time. So it's something that I think that we also have to remember too that there weren't many games where Kittle and Reed were both healthy at the same time. Because remember, Kittle got hurt week 1, and then Reed got hurt on the turf at Meadowlands. Which I hope that we all hope that they don't have to ever play there again.
No games, yeah, no.
But in theory, yes, but the player, no. If it was me and I was trading for an NFC East tight end, I would still trade for Evan Ingram because as much as he has his drop issues and he hasn't really he was really good his first year and he's just kind of not really ever played that well since then. Mm-hmm. I think the talent's there, and he's somebody that I think the value's still good. For me, when I watch Zach Ertz, he doesn't separate as well. A lot of the stuff he was just being force-fed targets for a long time. I know you're super into fantasy, so I'm sure you saw. He was literally one of their only receiving options for a while, and Wentz just had tunnel vision for him. So it's a cost thing. If they were able to eat the contract, and it would cost me a 5th or a 6th round pick or something like that. I don't nearly value day 3 picks as much as I do picks 1 through 4. Those first 4 rounds are extremely important, but beyond that, yeah, I would take the risk, but I wouldn't feel great about it. It's not a situation I'm not looking at really what he does that's so much better than what Ross Dwelley could do right now. And I think, again, it's a situation where the name sounds really good. We had Zach Ertz he had that one where he catch 118 balls in 2018 or 2019, one of those years, a couple years ago. He had an insane amount of catches.
18.
So, yeah, it sounds really good in theory, but again, from just a practicality standpoint, I think so much of it isn't looking at what Zach Ertz could do. It's how much better is Zach Ertz than what they have now. The same thing, that's why the Julio thing's interesting, because looking at the receivers, as much as I'm I don't think it's that important. If you get Julio Jones, I can't sit here and make, as much as I love all the guys they have on the team now, I'm sorry, dude, I can't make the argument that you're not that much worse off than a guy that's been a perennial all-pro player. Zach Ertz has fallen off significantly worse than Julio is, so I think I could make the argument that while he might be an upgrade, is it worth giving up capital and eating the contract when I think Ross Dwelley has really good hands while he may not be the same level of athlete? I think that he's already on the team, he's already familiar with the system, and he's already locked in at a very reasonable price. And I just think that especially if they are keen on keeping Jimmy on the roster and he's going to start a certain amount of games, or even if Trey Lance wins the job and he's the backup for 25 or 24, whatever $1 million he's making this year, I would have a hard time. It really does hinder your ability to absorb salary like that when you have guys like Fred Warner that you're going to need to extend. Going into next year, they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do with Deebo Samuel, because I wouldn't be surprised with the way he's used. If he's like, hey, man, I want to stay here, but you guys are running me into the ground like a running back. I want to get paid now. My contract's due up season after. I want money now. So you have to be in a position, I think, where you're flexible financially and to when you're losing flexibility, you have to get some kind of reward in return. So like the Niners lost the flexibility of draft capital. As much as I really like Trey Lance and I'm extremely excited about it, like part of me, I love the draft and I love the prospect of thinking about new players coming in and stuff. And they sacrificed a significant amount of flexibility to do it. But the potential reward is a franchise-changing quarterback that's on a rookie deal and could be your face of the franchise for 10 years. What's the reward of getting a Zach Ertz when you're eating that kind of money? I just don't think it's worth it. And then again, it's kind of like Julio falls in the middle where you can make the argument for both sides, but it might be enough to just tip the scales where you're like, dude, it's Julio Jones. He's so good. Like you just like Kyle said, you move what you have to get a player like that. I don't think anybody's saying that about Zach Ertz. And then just from a pure like free agent standpoint, I wouldn't really get like Golden Tate. I haven't really seen much from him that would make me want to do it. Like, when he was on Detroit a couple years ago, I thought he was good enough. Then when he went to Philly, I thought he wasn't very good. He had some moments here and there with the Giants, but it's just like it doesn't move the needle enough for me personally. And again, my opinion really doesn't matter. But if you're asking me, like, I wouldn't do it.
Okay. Yeah, I think with the Golden Tate thing, it's more about just the way he fits with this offense. He's a good blocker. He's a willing blocker, and he hates Jalen Ramsey more than anything. So we have more reasons for the Rams-Niners thing to be, something else. But, for me, it's just, again, what do I know? I know that he's going to be solid, asked to do whatever he's asked to do. And at this point, Golden Tate's at the point of his career where he needs to be in a situation where he's chasing a championship for the vet minimum, things like that. We'll see how that plays out for the rest of this time. Here's a question that I have for you. And it's a twofold question. Post-draft, what is the strongest position group on the 49ers and what is the weakest? Start with the weakest. Start with the position group that gives you the most concern and maybe some, I guess, what's the word? Some options on how to fix those things. You're on mute.
That's actually kind of tough, man. I'm not going to lie, because I think I would say linebacker, honestly. Like, okay. I honestly think the line, and it's, I know people, Fred Warner's all pro Fred, and I know people really think Drake Green, but like beyond that, I don't think that they're very deep. I don't think, so I'll preface this with, I don't think they have any position group that I'm sitting here like losing sleep over at night where I'm like, there's just such an issue that like this is going to cost them in the long run. So it's not like I'm not sitting here saying that I think Drake Greenlaw is terrible and I think Fred Warner is going to like regress, but
that was a big discussion today on Twitter as well.
Yeah, and so like my whole thing with Drake Greenlaw is I think he has like when he came out of Arkansas, he played safety in college. He's very fast for a linebacker. He has great sideline to sideline speed. Just being completely objective, I think there are a lot of plays where it's the same. I have the same critique of Devin White, and everybody thinks Devin White's the best linebacker in football. So it's not just directed at Drake Greenlaw. I think some of these guys that are athletic freaks, they are so athletic that we see them moving around sideline to sideline, and it makes us super impressed. Like, wow, look how fast this guy is cutting to the sideline. He's stonewalling guys at the goal line and all these things. Like, it looks great. But what you miss is a lot of the plays that they're over pursuing or they're taking bad angles to the ball carrier, and they're so athletic that they might over pursue and come back and make a tackle on the back end, but they ultimately cost themselves 4 or 5 yards in leverage because they missed the tackle initially. So do I think Drake Greenlaw is like a serviceable linebacker? Like, of course. Do I think he's good value before they picked him in the 5th round? Like, the guy's been all you could ask for out of a 5th round linebacker. I just don't think that it's like this untouchable, like, yeah, dude, I was there for that game in Seattle, man. Like, I know how excited people are about that and how he kind of bought himself a lot of equity with that play. I totally understand it. But Fred Warner is phenomenal, but it's only natural to expect that there might be a slight regression because of how good he was last year. It's very hard to be that good year in, year out. And then again, with Drake Greenlaw, it's kind of like, is he going to take that next step in coverage? Is he going to be a guy that's going to put it all together with the athletic ability and everything else on the field? Because again, I see all the stats, and like the missed tackle stat is the one I see all the time. And again, that's missed tackle stats literally mean that you are right there in a phone booth with somebody, and if they get by you, like that's a missed tackle. The missed tackle stat can be very misleading because if you take yourself out of the play entirely, you're not going to get charged with a missed tackle. So, again, I think it's linebacker, but I don't think it's a problem. And, again, like if they were to get another year out of Drake Greenlaw and then he were to walk after his rookie deal was done, like they got all they could ask for out of a 5th-round linebacker. I'm not sitting here trying to say that I think Drake Greenlaw is just like a weak link that's holding the whole team back. I just think that the linebacker group as a whole isn't as deep as it could be because I believe beyond him, Nate Jerry's the next guy.
Al-Shaair.
Yeah, Al-Shaair, Flanagan Fowles. Those are good. I think they're good NFL players. I'm not sitting here saying that they're terrible. Again, this isn't like they're so bad. I literally had to stop for a second when we first started this to try and think about it. It's because I think every other position grouping is that good. I would have leaned corner, but I really do like Verrett. K1 coming back, obviously. I think Mosley is going to have a huge step forward, and I do think Richard Sherman ultimately comes back too. Safety is really strong. The D-line is really good. And that's the biggest difference for me. The D-line had a lot of depth added to it. The linebacker depth I really didn't like. I hope Nate Jerry comes in and is awesome, but last year he was literally one of the worst linebackers in football.
And pass coverage, the worst.
Exactly, and I can't, like, objectively looking at that, if you're really asking for my honest opinion, that's just what I would have to say. But I think they're in a good spot where I really have to sit here and think about it. Like, it wasn't like I could just snap to it and, like, give you an answer right away. So, yeah, I would probably say a linebacker, honestly, and that's just – it just is an unfortunate circumstance because they're kind of like the shortest broomstick at this point. Like they were kind of just like the least ideal because I think they're very good. It's just everybody else is that much better that they're kind of just like a victim of circumstance, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, I would go linebacker.
All right, so I'm gonna go cornerback, not secondary, because you're absolutely right with safeties, right? You know, Kwaski, Ward, Moore, Harris. They're fine. You know, Hufanga, they're fine. You know, that's fine. Corners where I get a little skittish. Jason Verrett put it all together last year and was healthy. Is that the exception or is that the rule? If he goes down, now you're looking at Mosley being one and having to cover ones. And we've seen him cover ones and we've seen him, look, solid player. Again, gotten a lot out of him, you know. After that, I like Ambry Thomas, but we don't know what he is yet because he didn't play last year. Again, you're hoping that he is what you're saying he is, or not you, I mean what they think he's going to be. And after that, Tim Harris, Dante Johnson, that gets really scary at corner. You know, then you find yourself in those Miami games where Brian Allen's trying to cover Devontae Parker and everybody's just going at him. I'm not saying that in a way that I'm trying to be, you know, negative or anything like that, but corner is where it really scares me because if Jason Verrett goes down, then things start to get hairy. And it almost goes right back to what we said about wide receiver. If one of those guys has injuries, then you start to worry a little bit. But corner is the one where I get worried. You know, like I said, like Mosley, very solid, but press him into duty where he has to cover a Devontae Adams for a whole game. You saw what happened. Doesn't help that Aaron Rodgers is throwing the ball. You see what happens. Sometimes those things can happen. 17-game season, war of attrition, injuries are going to happen. The 49ers, I had implored them, and you had too. You know, you were the one who came up with A.J. Boye before I did. But we were imploring them to go ahead and add some depth to this cornerback room. Steven Nelson's out there. Go add him. Just have him there just in case. Like almost a breaking. Like Verrett was there as a break in case of emergency type guy. Just turns out that he turns out to be the best corner on the team. So, you know, everybody wants to pile on Spoon. Spoon's not here anymore as a safety net to play anymore for you. Do you know that Tim Harris is good? Do you want to take a chance with Dante Johnson? So when it comes to corner, that's the part where I get a little skittish. It's not the secondary. It's not the secondary as a whole because safeties are stacked. It's the corners. That's the part where I get a little nervous, especially if we're considering injuries, because injuries are going to happen. They just can't happen at the rate that they happened last year. It's almost a mathematic impossibility that happens.
Literally, yeah.
Like, it's almost like it's impossible for that to happen again. And if it does happen again, and like I said, I forget on whose show, there's somebody with a voodoo doll, and they're just like poking, and they're just getting all of the players out. So corner's the part where I get a little nervous. I love the Ambry Thomas pickup. Lenoir fits in where KK would be. Remember, KK's on a 1-year deal. So it seems like this organization understands KK's not here for that much longer. Let's get his replacement. Tart's on a 1-year deal. Let's get somebody who can roam the box. You know, that those things are there. Like, you have those in place. But again, can you count on that? And I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to talk about unknowns. And that's what I mean. Like you have to kind of prepare for the worst when it comes to all of these things. And if, God forbid, Jason Verrett goes down, man, you're in a world of hurt when it comes to that secondary because you don't know. So many unproven things. But again, Ambry Thomas could come out and take Mosley's job. Like, that's in the range of outcomes. That is. It's not something that I think is going to happen. I think Mosley's going to start across from whoever, you know, is Verrett. But it could happen. And that's where I get a little scared. You know, when it comes to secondary, it's just the corners really that has to, you know, has me a little bit nervous.
And that's honestly, like, I was going back and forth. It was kind of like I wasn't expecting that like question. So like it was like Jason didn't like tell me before and he would ask me that, so I literally had to stop and think. So like it was a very organic response. But that would have, if I had time to think, it would have been one or the other. So I think that's totally fair. You know, like admittedly, like I bought like one of the only Niners, like, you know, a little bit before, Trey Lance doesn't count because it was pretty obvious it was going to be one of like three guys. But Lenore was one of the guys, like, dude, I was big on him. I thought we're like, you know, it's a Pac-12 guy. I love watching Pac-12 football. Oregon's had a very good secondary for a long time. I liked Thomas Graham too and Lenore. So when they took him, I loved it. I think he could actually contribute his rookie year. I'm getting more familiar with Ambry Thomas. I like what I see, but I think he projects more as a project long term, whereas Lenore, I think, coming right away. But yeah, I'm with you. It is kind of a situation where if somebody gets hurt, you're not like screwed, but you're not feeling great, and you're in a position where teams will probably start picking up. And that's another thing where it's like, you know, a lot of those like plays where Mosley was getting picked on by like Hopkins and stuff, they were running little comebacks and little gimmicks. It's not like he was getting burned down the sideline. No. It was just. No. It's very hard it's hard for Jalen Ramsey to guard DeAndre Hopkins.
Right.
And no offense to Emmanuel Mosley, he's not Jalen Ramsey. Most people aren't. And I think that he will end up being better. And that's another reason why I think it would be good to get Richard Sherman back in the fold, because as much as people say he's washed or he's not, like, I see it all over Twitter, people acting he's just terrible, they don't want him on the team. Teams are still throwing to the other side of the field from him. They're like, NFL players still respect him enough to not want to throw the ball at him. And if it's him and Verrett on the other side, then you're left in a position where they're gonna have to pick one or the other. And to me, I'd feel great about those options. Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. It's really tough. I think those are the two units where they're very top heavy, like Warner, Verrett, like even Greenlaw to an extent. Like I like these guys, Kalen Williams, but the depth is certainly like there's a concern for sure.
Yeah, and even with Jalen Ramsey, you know, Darnell Mooney ate him up on a double move. It happens, you know, and he's the best in the league. I mean, it's like him and like James Bradbury. Those are the best, and it happens, right? So I mean, it's more just about injuries and it's more about depth. Let's pivot real quick. What is the strongest group coming out post-draft right now for the 49ers that you feel?
D-line, 100%. They did such a good job revamping that D-line. I love so many of these signings. I think Zach Kerr out of Carolina. They got Hurst and Key from the Raiders, who I think both are going to end up being phenomenal additions. It went back to last year, so I don't know if we can count it. But I really like Jordan Willis. I think he's a great athlete, and he's a guy that can be a situational pass rusher that can come in and relieve Ebukam and Bosa occasionally and come in and be a guy on passing downs that's going to be able to – he has that nice bend around the corner. He's going to be a double-digit sack guy? No, I don't think so. But he's a guy that can contribute 4 or 5, give you 25, 30 pressures a year. And I'm just looking at it, and it's not the star-studded, you know, when they had Buckner and Armstead and Bosa and Ford and all these guys. But when you're looking at a starting defensive line that has Bosa, Kinlaw, and then maybe Kerr, DJ Jones, depending on what they're doing, and Armstead outside, and then you're able to rotate in all these other guys, it, to me, leads them to a position where, again, it's going to be unrealistic to expect that same output, but I expect a huge year from Javon Kinlaw. His knee's cleaned up now. He says his knee feels infinitely better than it did last year. He's going to have an actual offseason this year to get ready. He's going to have time to gel with that line. And Nick Bosa just has such a positive effect on everybody else around him. And when you look at Javon Kinlaw, I know a lot of people, like, you know, they wanted him to come in and be DeForest Buckner, basically, because there are a lot of people, I hurt me too, seeing DeForest Buckner leave. He never is going to be the same player. Buckner came out as a guy that was much more slender, had a lot more natural pass rushing moves to him, but also was susceptible to getting gashed in the run game. If you watch Kinlaw versus the run, this man is 6'5", 330 pounds, and he's eating up multiple interior alignment at the same time. And what that's going to do ultimately is you're going to either be forced to leave him one-on-one with your guard, or you're going to have your guard and center chip him at the same time, which is ultimately going to leave Armstead with a one-on-one. Maybe DJ Jones. We know DJ Jones has crazy amount of shake for the big guy that he is. And then you have Bosa. Like, it's going to put defenses into a terrible – or sorry, not defenses, offensive lines into a terrible position where they're going to have to start picking and choosing rather than just last season where it got to a point where it's just like, all right, Eric Armstead's the only guy in this D-line who really has a great track record. We're going to double him every play. And then everybody was acting like Eric Armstead just was terrible all of a sudden. Like, no, the guy that was the focus of the, you know, opposing team's offensive line. So I love the depth, and it leaves them in a position where, hey, if a Javon Kinlaw or Armstead or a Bosa, one of these guys, God forbid, they were to tweak an ankle or go out for a week or two, I don't think that the pass rush is so thin the way it might have been a year ago that you're like, oh, okay, well, now we have to change our entire defensive game plan. We have to blitz, 15 times a game and bring pressure way more often, which they did last year. I think that you're in a position where you can get back to more dropping 6 and 7 in coverage and having a comfortable amount of pass rush production coming from those guys on the line. But I also think that D'Amico Ryans will bring a little bit more pressure, but it's going to be organic. It's not going to be forced to be like, our pass rush just isn't getting it done. We have to blitz these guys. It's going to be more, hey, we're giving them a hard time with our pass rush, and we're going to start peppering in Fred Warner and Greenlaw and some of these guys blitzing, and Jimmy Ward and Tart. And that's what's so good about this Niners defense as a whole, is that there's so many guys that can do different things. Your guy Kwasi can come in and drop down from the box, sneak in there from the slot and blitz and take out a quarterback, take out a running play to the outside zone. Ward can do the same thing and he can play in the slot. Quarterbacks get used to him playing one-on-one in the slot, and all of a sudden he's blitzing off the edge. Armstead I've seen drop into coverage and do it. Like, these guys can do so many different things. So I think that getting the depth back on the D-line is so huge because it's going to allow them to build, just like on offense, if you're running the ball well, it sets up the play action. On defense, if you're getting pressure with 4 guys down, it really sets up the creativity of what you can do when you are bringing pressure with 5, 6, even 7 guys at a time, and you're starting to run some of these exotic blitzes, which I expect D'Amico Ryans to do.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback off that because that's exactly what I expect them to do as well, too. You know, when you look at how they drafted, they're kind of tipping their hand as to how D'Amico is going to run this offense. He wants to run a lot more man. They ran a lot more man last year with Saleh. And, you know, when you hear Kwasi talk in a press conference saying, I want to blitz 12 times a game, that's not him getting that from nowhere. That's him having a conversation with D'Amico and talking about that. And he did it in 2017. He did it when he roamed around the box. There's plenty of film on that. So I expect, hey, we're going to send Bosa. We're going to send Ibukam, let's say even D Ford on the other side, but we're also going to send someone else at you because we're comfortable on the back end of what we're doing. You know, there's going to be some growing pains because D'Amico Ryans does understand this scheme, but there's going to be growing pains as far as calling the right plays at the right time. And I think that took Robert Saleh a little while to learn as well. Robert Saleh didn't really adjust much in the beginning, and that's what I'll always give Robert Saleh credit for. He continued to get better. How many coaches can say that, can actually say that they've gotten better to the point that he became a head coach? So I agree with you there. I am going to say the 49ers' strongest group right now is a group that you're not going to want to hear. I know how you are. It's running backs.
It's okay. Yeah, it's deep.
Yeah,
it's deep.
It's running backs. So Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Trey Sermon, Elijah Mitchell, Wayne Gallman, JaMychal Hasty. This is a room that is ready to compete. And if there are injuries, then boom, it doesn't matter. Next guy up, they're going to get it schemed up. You know, you have to remember, I know a lot of people didn't like the idea of drafting 2 running backs, but you have to remember Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson are not under contract next year. So the 49ers are looking to the future. Elijah Mitchell, we saw him at Mobile in the Senior Bowl, profiles just like a Raheem Mostert. One of those one-cut speed guys and go. So it's clear, again, not just on the defensive side, on the offensive side of the ball, the 49ers are looking to the future. So I'll say it's running backs. I mean, honestly, Raheem Mostert is going to be fine. He'll probably start. Jeff Wilson is Jeff Wilson. All he does is score touchdowns. Trey Sermon profiles as the bell cow that this team hasn't had since Frank Gore. And that's on baby. I'm just going to say that. So they're stacked over there on that side with this strong running back room. And again, when you look at drafting Trey Lance, drafting Banks, drafting Elijah Moore, drafting 2 running backs, it's very clear that the 49ers are telling you, we are going to run the ball down your throat until you stop us. And like you said, Kyle Shanahan would be content running the ball 65 times in a game and not throwing 1 pass if you can't stop it. But that's not how the league works. But that's exactly what the 49ers intend to do. Get back to that bully ball that was so important to 2019. Opens up the play action for regardless who the quarterback is. But it's the running back room, I got to say, man. And quarterback's right behind it, honestly. You know, say what you want. But having Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance and the GOAT Nate Sudfeld, who can beat that quarterback room, honestly? It's that deep. So I'm going to go with running back, but quarterback's right behind it. But I'm going to go with running back just because the 49ers did a great job this draft in picking guys that will fit what they want to do. They saw the success that they had with Raheem Mostert. They want to add a guy just like it. Cool. Jeff Wilson is a fine player, brought back on a tender. Now you've got a bell cow. Now you've got guys that can fit in. You know, it's just unfortunate that one of these guys probably isn't going to make the roster. I'm going to guess Wayne Gallman, only because his money is not guaranteed before the season starts, if I'm not mistaken. But you have to remember that they refer to Kyle Juszczyk as a running back. So he piles into carrying how many backs every game day. So that's another thing that you need to keep your eye on. You know, JaMychal Hasty is somebody that people are very excited on. It's good enough time right now to put depth in front of him so he can learn a little bit more. If he turns into something, then great. We know Kyle Shanahan's success with undrafted free agents, but I'm going to say running back, and I'm going to go with that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think, like, a lot of people think, like, I just hate running backs. It's not true at all. I don't like the way that some teams have allocated their resources towards it, and I think the 49ers have done a great job, because what they do is they have a situation where they're going to go into it with at least 4. I think they're going to have 5 total, because Juszczyk counts as a running back. So he'll be the 5th running back, per se. They're going to have 4 different guys that bring 4 different skill sets, and also, if something were to happen, God forbid to one, it's the most physically demanding position in the sport, in my opinion, where you're getting just beat up every time you touch the ball. You have 3 other guys who can step in. And the 49ers are still, they're middle of the league in terms of positional spending at the running back position. But they've spent less on 5 different guys than Carolina, New York, Tennessee, Dallas.
Minnesota.
And some of the teams that gave out big deals. Minnesota, Dalvin Cook. Those guys gave more money to one player than the 49ers did to 5 combined. And again, if it's a generational talent at quarterback or something, yeah, sure, I'm not going to do the 5 players to 1 argument. I mean, you could have 10 players who won't equal Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, one of these guys. But at running back, give me the 5 over the 1 every single time. There isn't a single running back in the league right now that I'm looking at. And I really like Dalvin Cook. I like Nick Chubb. I like a lot of these guys. There's nobody, in my opinion, that's worth that amount of money when you could get the same production roughly from 5 different guys at a cheaper price, and the safety net of knowing if something were to happen to one of those guys, you have 4 other guys that could step in, or 3 other guys if you don't count Juszczyk. And honestly, if you had to give Juszczyk 15 carries a game, I think he could do it. He's athletic enough that in a pinch, he probably could sit there and give you 15 carries and average 3.5, 4 yards a carry. So, yeah, I think the 49ers have done it the right way. I wasn't thrilled that they traded up for a running back when they were still edge players. And again, this is just my opinion. I'm not in a football front office. The 49ers know infinitely more about what they want for their team than I do. But if it was me running a team, I would have taken the edge player or the corner still on the board rather than trading up for a running back. But hey, Trey Sermon is a solid. He does a lot of things very well that I really like. So I don't dislike the player, but I would also be a hypocrite if I was preaching all these things that I feel about running backs and be like, oh, the 49ers did it, so it's okay. No, I'm still going to hold them to the same standard. But if Trey Sermon goes out there and he averages 5.5 yards a carry, 5 yards a carry, and he ends up being this great running back for 3 or 4 years in the system, maybe it's worth the extra 4th-round pick that they coughed up to move up, So it's not a huge cost, and I think that the way the 49ers went about it was about as smart as you can, because they know that Kyle's going to maximize their ability, and Mike McDaniel and Bobby Turner and this great run system that they have set up, they're going to put these guys in a great position to succeed. But again, it's a situation where as good as you can be with undrafted guys and unheralded guys and guys like Mostert bounced around practice squads before he ended up with the Niners, if you're going in your hand selecting a guy that's good enough to be drafted within the top 7 rounds of their class, it's not guaranteed, but you're setting yourself up to have an even greater ceiling with that running game. So we've seen great things. We saw Raheem Mostert again, who was an undrafted free agent. He was bouncing around on practice squad, ran for 230 and 4 touchdowns in the biggest game of the year other than the Super Bowl. So am I saying that Trey Sermon's automatically going to be better just because he was a 3rd-round pick? No, but it leads you to that range of outcome where if you could get this done with Raheem Mostert, imagine what you could do with a guy where the consensus is around the league that he's worthy of the capital you gave up. So I'm I like what they've done, and I think I did a little thread on Elijah Mitchell. It's on my Twitter, and you can see my ad here. It's on the screen. If you guys go to my Twitter, it should be on there. He does a lot of things that I really like too. He's very physical. I think everybody kind of got sidetracked by the whole 4.32 40 that he ran, and it's this guy's just another Raheem Mostert. First of all, there is no other Raheem Mostert in my opinion. Raheem Mostert's so unique with the way he hits holes and the vision that he has and how fast he gets from point A to point B. I haven't seen anything like that in a long time, to be honest. So I don't think it's fair to Raheem Mostert to say that. And it's also not fair to Elijah Mitchell, because I think Elijah Mitchell runs between the tackles in a very physical way that, just no offense to Raheem Mostert, he's just not built for that. He's a different style of runner. So I think he runs closer to 4.4 or 5, something like that. I think those pro day 40s are a little skewed. So he is very fast, his speeds are, but he's physical, man. He runs like Jeff Wilson does, kind of, where he runs with a little bit of anger. So long story short, I think the 49ers running back room has a wide variety of talent at their disposal, and they just have so many options. And honestly, I think Wayne Gallman's going to make the team too. You live in Jersey, Wayne Gallman's a good player, dude. You're a fan.
I love him.
Yeah, he's a good player. I think people are kind of just forgetting about him now. I wouldn't be surprised at all if one of the rookies ends up on the practice squad and Wayne Gallman's on the active roster, because he's a good running back. And I think he had options. I don't think he came to San Francisco because it was the only team that was willing. Like, I think he chose that for a reason. Probably, again, it's very admirable, desirable to want to play for Mike McDaniel and Bobby Turner and Kyle Shanahan, obviously. But like, Gallman's probably gonna make the team. I think Wilson will make the team. I think Mostert's obviously going to make the team. And then it's going to probably be a competition between Sermon and Elijah Mitchell. And one of those guys will make the team. And then one's probably going to end up on the practice squad, in my opinion. Don't think, no offense to Jamichael Hasty, I don't think he'll make it. I loved Austin Walter. He's gone. He's a Jet now. He's going to go run for 1,000 yards for Mike LaFleur over there. So
no, that's going to ruin my Michael Carter dynasty shares. I've been walking away with him in almost every single rookie draft. Don't say that. No, honestly, man, I agree with you, man. And as being a Giants fan, and also playing fantasy football, Wayne Gallman was solid, man. And he's just a solid football player. And he almost gets lost in the shuffle. And I love the move. The only thing that kind of leans me to maybe him being the odd man out is that he has no guaranteed money, nothing tied to it. But he does have that name recognition that at least he can be solid, pick up yards when you need him to play. He's actually a better pass catcher than people want to give him credit for as well, too. See, that's the thing about fantasy football that everybody wants to take a dump on. Hey, listen, I wouldn't have known about, all right, I would have known about him because I live 25 minutes from MetLife, right? And I live in Giants country. But playing fantasy football and you getting to watch him, he's actually solid, man, and he did very well in the same system that Saquon Barkley sometimes struggled in, only because Saquon's trying to make everything the home run. I think he needs to settle down with the, sometimes he's pitter-pattering in the backfield because he wants to make somebody miss, and he can because he's Saquon Barkley. But Wayne Gallman is a very much straight downhill runner, and that's something that the 49ers need. And in terms of depth, when you're talking about a 17th game, I could totally see him sticking around with this roster, even if I think that he might be the odd man out. But that's another reason why I didn't have a problem with the two running backs, is because depth is wealth. And with this extra game, you're going to need it as much as you can. But I agree, with a lot of the points that you had. This is a great discussion, bro, honestly. But I think we should wrap it up here, honestly. We've almost gone for an hour. Didn't know we were going to be able to do that. Jordan, anything that you're working on, anything that you want to tell the people about that they should be tapped into, aside from the threads that you do on Twitter, which you have done on Trey Lance, you've done on Elijah Mitchell, anything else that you got working on right now?
No, I'm mainly doing those. I have more Trey. I'm going to do one. A lot of people probably don't want to see it. I'm trying to do the positive stuff because it's good to get people excited. As much as I do really like Trey Lance, there are a lot of things that are concerning as well, and that should be discussed. It's only fair to discuss the good and the bad. So I do have a thread of things that I wasn't particularly thrilled about, some accuracy stuff, some mechanic stuff that I'm working on. So if you go to my Twitter, if you go check my Twitter, I appreciate anybody who follows if you want to see. But yeah, I've been trying to do threads and stuff. I have like 90 hours of game film, all college, all 22 on my computer that I've been going through. So I understand not everybody has access to that stuff. So what I'm trying to do is to go through it, make cut-ups, and then post it to the timeline so that, a lot of people don't have access or the time or both to go through it. I fortunately do. So I'm trying to cut it down and give some things to feel good about, and then some things just to create discussion. Like, hey, if we get to a point where it's, people are coming to Kyle Shanahan with pitchforks for why Trey Lance isn't starting right away, I could point, we could go to these threads and point to, hey, well, he might have an accuracy issue with this. He dips his shoulder a bit when he throws out far wide, did the far hash on his right side, little things like that. But there's also a lot of really great things. Like I posted about some of his rushing ability, some of his throwing ability, and I've been trying to work through the running backs. I do have the Ambry Thomas stuff and Lenore stuff to go through, and Hufanga, all these guys. So over the, I'm trying to space it out a little bit, but yeah, that's basically what I'm working on now, man. Is just doing cut-ups of the all 22 I have and trying to share it as much as I can. So people, like, again, if you don't have the time or the resource to go through all 22, I'll do what I can to summarize it for you.
Yep, and you got a big-ass message because that was pretty loud right there, honestly. With me, guys, we'll be back on the channel. There was just something going on with my YouTube. Apparently, I was banned even though I haven't been on for a while. I don't know what's happening, but we'll get it together. Got some pretty cool things lined up. I can't really disclose right now. Still working on, but, we'll be back on the channel. I'm glad that I got to do this with Jordan because he's somebody who I really respect. I really, I even look up to when it comes to certain things because I learned from him, and everybody else should be having that sort of attitude when it comes to other people. And nobody knows it all. Everybody should be looking to fill their cup up with other people's information. Just so happens that Jordan is somebody that I look up to and somebody that I love a lot. So, I was glad that I was able to do this with him and everything as well. So, I'll post this on my channel. You guys can find me on YouTube at Jason Aponte, on Twitter at Jason Aponte 2103. Sprint Right Option will be back tomorrow, hopefully, as long as I can get YouTube going. One way or another, we'll have the audio portion out, but I don't know about live. Let's see what happens. But other than that, thank you guys for tuning in. Jordan, thank you for joining me and helping me out here with this. Your insight is always welcome, and I think that, the people learned a lot from you. And we'll see you guys soon, and we'll talk with you guys tomorrow probably. Later.